Hey, welcome to the 10 Minutes for Democracy weekly live stream. This week, I'm going to be talking about, like most weeks, current events, the Colorado shooting. Biden had his first official presser or press conference. And what was the other main thing? I want to talk to you about some of my ongoing kind of COVID concerns. There's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of people are getting vaccinated, but I still have a lot of concerns about what's going to be happening in the next 6 months to even a year. And so that's one of the things that I want to talk about today, aside from those other things. Anyway, before I go into that, I haven't been posting a lot of videos independent of my streams the last week or two. I've been really trying to figure out my approach to making my videos, because the two main things I need to do with most of them is create content that is searchable, as well as creating content that creates an opportunity for to build the audience that I'm looking to build. The purpose of this channel isn't just to be another talking head talking about politics. It's to find people like-minded in the sense of how important democracy is, in order to get people involved in actual governance. Because democracy isn't something where everybody else just does it and we just sit back, vote every 2 to 4 years and let them do what they want to do. It's really about consistent engagement. And so what I'm trying to do is build a channel that does that. And I found that the videos I've made in the past, some of them have trended. I've gotten a few thousand viewers on a few of them, but I haven't necessarily targeted my audience well. And that's one of the things I'm going to try to be working on in the next few weeks. I've got a few videos queued up, I think, now that I'll hopefully release in the next week. That'll be about things like related to that. I've one about cancel culture, which may seem to be kind of the moment, but I actually have a connection to democracy that I think will make those worthwhile, and hopefully, they'll be searchable. So that's all I'm going to talk about as far as my channel right now. I'm going to go into and start talking about news events of the week. So the first thing I wanted to talk about today, news-wise, is the Colorado mass, shooting, or it's a shooting or, mass murder, however you want to refer to it. These things have happened and unfortunately become very common in America. And we're kind of unique that way. No other country has exactly this problem that we have. Now, before I go talking about policy and what I think we should do about it, I wanted to talk a little bit about just what we know at this point about what happened. So the assailant, the man that pulled the trigger, is a man named Ahmad al-Alawi Alyssa. I think Alyssa is actually his first name, and it's one of those names that the family name goes first. But regardless, that's his name. Now, what we know about him, it looks like, is that he had some problems growing up. He got kicked out of school for cold cocking some kid and actually, I think, drawing blood and injuring and hospitalizing another student for going to some rage. There are other reports. I had a CNBC article I read from yesterday that talked about people saying he might have had delusions, and it looks like mental illness is seriously at play in terms of his motivations and why he did this. 6 days before the shooting, he bought the weapon that looks like he used to actually commit the mass murder. And then he showed up at the grocery store 2 days before. I think his sister reportedly said that she saw him playing with something she thought was an assault rifle. And then the day of course, he showed up at some grocery store, shot the place up, and killed. One of the people he killed was a police officer who was first on the scene, trying to obviously stop him. And so that's essentially what happened and what we know at this point. It plays into what I believe to be what seems to be to me the narrative we often see with these shootings, which is someone who isn't quite right in the head, but was able to quickly get their hands on a weapon. It happens in different ways each time. In this case, it looks like he just went to a store and bought it. But in other cases, it's been, a background check that took too long. There have been all kind of different reasons why people have been able to acquire a weapon. But it looks like that's the sequence of events that led to this occurrence. Now, of course, after this happens, you see all the politicians, they all come out and talk. They give thoughts and prayers. Some people say, okay, this means we need to do X, or this means we need to do Y. And really, I don't really listen too much to that stuff. It oftentimes belies the political reality that we're in, where our government is policy-wise mostly gridlocked. Aside from the reconciliation exception, it's hard to pass any legislation. So I hear all that stuff and it mostly just my eyes kind of glaze over, because it's hard for me to be optimistic about anything being done when we've had mass murders, shootings before, and nothing has come of them. So one thing I'd like to point out as we shift into talking about policy is that, the idea of the oftentimes conservative idea of personal accountability doesn't do us much good, at least to the people who are victims of these sort of crimes. We can throw the book at this guy, put him under the jail, capital punishment, but that doesn't protect the next group of people, the next set of victims for the next mass shooting. So what I'm looking for in any policy that I'm advocating for, or looking to support, or potentially think is a good idea, is something that's proactive, not something that just deals with what happens afterward. And that's most of what we have at this point. So in my opinion, as far as this goes, there are no easy answers. Yes, we could return to having the assault weapons ban, which would try to hopefully prevent us from getting weapons of mass death like AR-15s and M16s and all kinds of weapons that can deliver and kill a whole bunch of people very quickly off the streets. Of course, one of the main problems with that is that there are already 300 odd million weapons floating around our country as it is. And even nowadays, handguns can kill a whole bunch of people fairly quickly. And it's pretty clear the Supreme Court believes that you can't really keep people from having handguns. However, I would still say there's a difference between any handgun and an AR-15. So that's something that would seem to be something I would support in terms of having, restoring the assault weapons ban, which we had for about 20 years, but we lost, I believe, during the George W. Bush administration. But I don't know that bringing that back is going to be kind of cure-all when there's so many guns floating around. In this case, it seems like it may have actually worked, though, because it seemed like he went out and just bought the weapon from a dealer, from someone who just was selling firsthand new weapons. It wasn't somebody getting it secondhand or from some old collection or something. So in this case, or with people who are mentally unstable, who don't necessarily have people around them that are going to hand them weapons to use, preventing the new sale of military assault weapon style weapons would seem to be pretty useful to do. Now, one thing that also happens, oh man, I can't find my cursor. Okay. One thing I want to point out at this point is that there are two bills that actually passed in 2018 that try to address some issues with the circulation of guns in our society, that were brought up again, and actually I think were passed already just in the last 4 or 5 days. One is a bill called the Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2021, or H.R. 8. It closes the so-called gun show loophole, which is to say sales of weapons between private parties. Essentially what it forces is for even when two private parties want to do a weapon purchase from obviously one person to another, they have to involve an actual dealer who can then has the equipment and the logistics to perform a background check. That way you can't just go to a gun show and just buy a weapon without the background check system having an effect on that. Of course, people wouldn't like this. People feel like it's my gun. I want to sell it to somebody I know, my friend. I should be able to. But that's a huge loophole that gets exploited and becomes the primary method of exchanging a lot of types of weapons. So that's one of them. And it has exceptions. That bill does have exceptions for family members, for situations involving shooting ranges. So it does have some common sense exceptions to it. Also a situation where someone feels they're in immediate danger and need a weapon. So there are some exceptions to that. It's not something where it's all or nothing. They try to be smart about that bill. So that's one, that's H.R. 8. Then there's also H.R. 1446, the Enhanced Background Checks Act. That bill is a background checks. One of the issues, I think this came with one of the previous shootings, is that the background checks only have 3 days to execute. And what this bill does is it actually pushes it out to 10 days. Previously, if the 3-day background check doesn't complete within 3 days, the seller of the weapon can go ahead and just sell it without having completed the background check. This bill stretches that out to 10 days so that the government and whatever processes go on have more time to complete them. It makes it less likely a background check fails and that weapon isn't distributed. So I think that's a useful bill to use. I don't know why 3 days was this arbitrary value given. It seems like there are exceptions for the 3 days, I think, in general. But if we're going to make sure we have a background check, we should make sure there's a background check. So that's H.R. 1446. As both of those, I think, passed out of the House. But the question is, will they die again in the Senate? I think Joe Manchin's already expressed concerns about H.R. 8, the background check one, saying he really does want to allow private owners to buy and sell guns to other private parties without involvement of the background check system on an ongoing basis. So it may be that nothing happens with that if he really stands in the way of that. But the question really is, what bills and what legislation, this is true of any legislation that can't pass through reconciliation, is what legislation are Democrats willing to hold other Democrats into account for? Are they willing to go to that person, call them out and say, you're the reason why this is failing? Because oftentimes they'll say, we'd like to do this. We think it's great. I'm in support of this. But then they're all silent and don't really actually have any criticism of any other Democrats. Or, Republicans may do the same thing, but Democrats are in power right now, so I'm looking at them, and they're the ones who generally are willing to do regulation of gun manufacturing and distribution. So I'm looking to them to see what they are and aren't willing to do to actually try to get this across the finish line. Because we can all be in favor of whatever we want, but the question is, what are we willing to do about it? Now, the other aspect that you don't hear people talk much about when it comes to situations like this is the mental health aspect. This person clearly had some mental health issues, though they don't seem to be serious enough that we could force him to be, hospitalized. But the only thing I can think is that we need to make it a little bit easier for people to seek out help voluntarily if they want to. And I would be in favor of legislation that would allow us to do that. But I don't know if that would have helped in this situation. I don't know if that would have helped in this situation. But it's certainly something that we should have, because we don't want people that are mentally unstable, unable to get the help that they need. That's to me another type of healthcare. It's mental health. So I think that's not talked about enough, but I think it's just as important, because as a lot of conservatives like to say, somebody really wants to go out and kill a bunch of people, they're going to probably be able to somehow at least try to do it. Now, I don't completely agree with that. I think there are things we can do to make it harder to find those weapons of war. But on the other hand, we ideally want to stop people from having those thoughts and those desires and trying to carry them out. So we'll see what, if anything, Congress actually accomplishes. But it looks like that's the landscape that we're dealing with at this point. If you're watching, you have any questions for me, any comments, anything you want me to talk about, just let me know. I'm watching my comments. That's why I glance over to the left to see if there are any comments out there so I can respond to them. So the next thing I wanted to talk about fairly briefly is Biden had his first news conference where he gave a statement and then had solicited questions from the news. And there were about 4 things that he brought up that I thought were worth talking about. One was, he's pointed out, now when Donald Trump was still president, he went to an agreement with the government of Afghanistan to pull our troops out by May 1st. And one of the things that was said during the press conference is that that Joe Biden said, this was him talking, that President Biden said is that we might not, which means we're not, when he says we're probably not or might not, we're not going to successfully reach that deadline of withdrawal by May 1st. He did say that he felt like we would get the troops out before 2022, but he had no real timetable for it. So that's something we have to continue to watch. We've been there now almost 20 years. I think it'll probably be 20 years by the fall. I think we're in the year 19 at this point. So that's the big question is, are we going to see Joe Biden actually complete our time in Afghanistan? And will it just be kicked, or will that can be kicked down the road for the next president? Another thing I think is, I've been talking about the filibuster a lot. And another thing President Biden talked about is his willingness and his support of the Senate going back to the talking filibuster. Now, like I talked about previously, to me, once you have a talking filibuster, you essentially don't have the 60 vote requirement anymore. And the reason why is because a talking filibuster for a motivated Senate majority can be eventually overcome. All the talking filibuster allows is for the minority party to make it known their objection and to raise awareness of whatever bill or issue that they're filibustering. Ultimately, if the Senate is motivated and persistent, they'll eventually get a chance for that bill to get an up or down vote. So I'm definitely in favor of the talking filibuster. If we can get Sinema and Manchin, I think Sinema Senator Sinema from Arizona may actually be the more diehard supporter of the existing filibuster. But they can get Manchin and Sinema on board, then I think there's a lot of legislation that might actually see the light of day in the Senate. Now, a surprising comment that I heard during that teleconference was that President Biden was very non-committal on whether or not he was going to undo Trump's trade war with China. You know, Donald Trump, when he was president, issued a bunch of tariffs against China and tried to instigate a trade war because of what he perceived to be activity by China, which I think everybody generally agrees China isn't a fair player when it comes to economics. But you know, it's one of those things where I don't know why we assume or expect anyone else to be fair. You know, I think it's a hardball game that, you know, worldwide economics is, you know, I don't know why we think that we should expect China to play nice with us. But anyway, so they're playing hardball. So President Trump decided we're going to play hardball too. So we put these tariffs on, which of course they strike back, which of course hurts some of our American businesses, especially and specifically some of the producers of, you know, the farmers and producers of food. And so as a result, we had to then start paying them money to help keep them afloat while we're doing this trade war. So the point is, in this case, it looks like President Biden isn't necessarily ready to pull back those tariffs and undo this trade war that we've gotten into, or it's kind of a trade skirmish. I mean, we're still doing a lot of business with China. It's kind of a skirmish. You know, it could become a trade war, but right now it's more so just a certain issues and a measured amount of tariffs and economic attacks on each side. But I'm wondering what President Biden's China policy is going to be, because he's fair to say that China is not a fair player in terms of our trade relationship with them. But on the other hand, it's still a relationship we choose to continue, we choose to allow to expand and get bigger over the last 20 years. To suddenly try to close it off produces a lot of side effects and hurts a lot of businesses here. And to what end do we think what's the goal of all of this? What do we think we're going to achieve? Because if we're just doing this out of spite, well, I don't know if that's necessarily a good policy position for us to have. So we'll see what happens with Biden there. But it was interesting to see that he's actually still weighing what his China economic policy is going to be. And the last thing, and this is kind of what's the best way to describe this? This was kind of a humble brag on President Biden's part, but he decided to double down on his promise of 100 million shots in arms in 100 days. And now he says we're going to be able to do 200 million shots in arms in the first 100 days. And I think he'll probably get there. And I think that's one of the best things, and one of the things he deserves the most credit for is the way he's been able to effectively, get the federal government in action to help get that done state by state. You know, we're here in California, we've seen federal sites go up to help California get our vaccinations done. And I think that's been done around the country, and that's a more activist role in fighting the pandemic than we saw under the previous president. And so I think it's some well-deserved kudos that he's getting for the fact that we're really being able to push forward on getting vaccination done. But as we'll talk about in a minute, I'm not entirely bullish on things being back to normal anytime soon. Okay. The other main issue, like coming into this stream, I started thinking about what I'm going to talk about, for any given stream. And one of the things that was clear I need to talk about at least a little bit, is the quote unquote border crisis that's going on. Now, the first thing I want to say about it is that I don't think that the narrative framing of this is particularly fair. And the reason why is because crisis kind of implies that something kind of suddenly happened. There's some sudden escalation. But it turns out, I saw a graph, and the number of people being met or coming into the border to have to be addressed by our border patrol and by ICE or by whoever, the amount of, I say border patrol because ICE is for like inside the country. So the amount of people has been growing for several years since some policy decisions made by the Trump administration. So to call this a crisis now and say you're kind of implying it wasn't a crisis last December or last October when the numbers were also rising at a similar rate. It's almost like we didn't expect President Trump to do anything about it. And so now that we have a different president, we suddenly want to give him a crisis that we can judge him on. But the fact of the matter is, this is an ongoing issue. There's also not a lot of discussion of why this is happening, about why the governments in Central America are so unstable, in need, and have so many people leaving them. There's no discussion of America's not exactly pristine history involving ourselves in the governments of Central America and our culpability in some of the crises that have occurred there, and the kind of colonialist instinct that we've still even had in the 20th century in terms of wanting certain governments that are more favorable to us in economic ways to be in charge, even when they aren't necessarily what the people want. And unfortunately, that's something that we don't really talk about or face, because that would color this issue of refugees and how we treat them, I think, a little bit, considering how I think America has at least a little bit of responsibility for some of the socio-political instability in that region. Now, I do think that the Biden administration is struggling a bit because they made a lot of promises about treating the people, especially kids that do come to our border, better. But we're finding that the facilities, we're just not equipped to handle the volume. And, I'm willing to give them a little, personally, I think we need to give them a little bit of leeway, a little bit of time to sort themselves out and try to figure out what to do and spin up more facilities, more bandwidth to address the problem that it is. And I don't think it's not a crisis. I just don't think it was a crisis that started yesterday or last week or 2 weeks ago. It's a crisis that started years ago. It's just that we decided not to talk about it nearly as much and not call it a crisis until, whenever the media decided to call it that a month ago or whenever it was. And here's a funny fact I want to leave you with, talking about that timeline. Did you know that President Trump is the only president in modern history since at least 1980 where the number of active border patrol have actually gone down during his administration? It went up under Obama, went up under Clinton, went up under George W., went up under, I believe, H.W., although his term was only 4 years. And I believe it even went up under Reagan. But Trump, for all his boasting and bravado, the number of actual border patrol went down slightly. I think it was a few hundred. It's like 19,000 something to 19,000 something. So I think it's a very interesting point. I always talk about who's going to be tough on the border and who's going to protect our borders. That wouldn't be necessarily what you would expect, but I think that it reflects, if nothing else, the difference between perception and reality we often see in the media and as individuals looking at our government. Even with someone who's seemingly as dishonest as President Trump was, we tend to at least believe the essence of what he's saying. But even sometimes that isn't necessarily true. And oftentimes his government didn't reflect much at all, even the conservative aspects of his can't think of the right word, his speeches and what he was saying. Like even what he was talking about that you would think he'd want to do, he wasn't necessarily accomplishing effectively. Okay, now, as I said, I think we've made a lot of progress in dealing with the pandemic, and things are starting to slowly return to a relatively normal state. However, I do have some concerns I wanted to share about the next 3 to 9 months and what I think we might come to see. So first, let me say that I'm not an expert, not a scientist. I'm just someone who reads and watches the news and takes in that information and kind of comes to my own opinions about it. So don't take this as kind of gospel or scientific fact. It's just what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from the news and the media. So one concern I have is whether or not we're going to reach herd immunity anytime soon. So not too long ago, and I actually reported on this previously, Dr. Fauci talked about how we saw how Dr. Fauci was inching up the numbers we were going to need in terms of being able to reach herd immunity. Initially, he started with 65, 70%. That was kind of what he was saying. But more recently, he's talked about 75, 80, even 85% vaccination in order to reach herd immunity. Now, the problem with that is polling only shows 70 to 75% of Americans are even willing to take the vaccine. Now, polling isn't always accurate, And we can always hope as time goes by and the norm of people taking the vaccine moves that needle a bit and gets us over 80%. And just the infection rate to some extent helps a little bit with herd immunity as well. But I do have a bit of concern that we're going to reach some stopping point, maybe like around 70 something percent, where vaccinations just aren't going to be happening. And we're going to have to do another round of trying to convince people to get vaccinated so that we can get over that last hump and reach the herd immunity that will allow us to really go back to living a normal life. Now, related to that, I'm also been a bit concerned about all the reports that I've been hearing about people getting infected a second time, or with the mutations or the changes in COVID-19 that can sometimes lead to that reinfection. And with something that seems to be mutating a fair amount, I have a lot of concern that a mutation is going to emerge before we reach herd immunity that's going to be immune to the existing vaccines. And if that happens, we have to start all over again. Now, I hope that doesn't happen, and I don't think, and it hasn't been reported that that has happened, but it is a concern of mine that the mutations, there have been several variants that have already emerged, and some vaccines have been less effective against those variants than others. So it does seem to have some effect on vaccine efficacy, these different mutations. So I'm just waiting and hoping that we reach herd immunity before we have to worry about some mutation that we have to start over again and wait another year for another vaccine. I really don't want to think about it, but it's an honest concern that I have about where we go from here. And the last thing is just try to be safe. You know, you hear more and more about these side effects, all these different ways that COVID can hurt us. And I really do worry about the people that are still going to get sick and even die between now and when we reach herd immunity. I mean, we're at over 500,000 now. We still have infection rates that are near where they were back in April and May. I mean, not the peaks, but the valleys. And we need to get even below that. We need to continue to see a drop rather than just plateau at those low numbers, to even lower, or we'll still have a non-zero death rate, and or not even close to being zero. And it's 6 months ago, I never imagined this many people would have died from it, and to see that now, it just makes me want to just have this be over, and for us to reach a point where this isn't something we have to worry about anymore. But it doesn't go away, and you have these breakouts where you have the numbers go way down, then they pop back up, and just has it gives me a lot of concern for people that and for communities that they get lax, they stop wearing the masks and stop social distancing, and this thing is persistent. I mean, we look at the flu. The flu has just about been eradicated this year. Like there's been almost zero flu deaths. There are usually like 30, 40,000 flu deaths every year. We've had almost none. That's how effective we have been as a society in trying to slow the spread of COVID-19. But yet, when it comes to, despite how well we've done against the flu, COVID-19 is still persisting. That, if nothing else, should convince you how infectious it is, how easily it spreads. I mean, flu can't even hold a candle to it. So those are my concerns about COVID-19. I think we made a lot of progress. I'm looking forward to getting my vaccine. That's going to make me feel personally a lot better because of all those side effects I've heard about. Damages to all kind of different internal organs, maybe even your brain. There have been people reported months ago, those strokes that were reported. It just seems like it's one of those diseases, very new. There's so much we don't know about it. That just makes me more concerned about it. So I think I've talked about this enough. I'm going to move on. I'm almost done here. Let's see what else I got. Okay, I think this was like the last thing I want to talk about. This is a little bit more fun, a little bit lighter. So the newest senator, Kamala Harris, our previous senator, became vice president. And so our governor had the opportunity to appoint a replacement. He did. He appointed a political ally who had been Secretary of State in California for several years, one Alex Padilla. He actually went to the same university that I did, though he had graduated, I think, before I even got there, or we may have overlapped 1 year. But he's been in politics for like 20 years. Knew a lot of people, very connected in that way. All these things I'm saying to you make me nervous about him. I get nervous about people because the political system tends to assimilate people into its way of thinking. So I wanted to share with you a couple of different. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So I received a bunch of emails from him. I don't even know how I got on his mailing list. I didn't sign up for it, but I got a bunch of emails from him asking for money because he has to run again in less than 2 years. His election's up in 2022 because the seat, when you appoint the new person, they just complete the existing term. The next term still has to come and occur on the same normal schedule. So he's up for re-election in 2022, but still it's a year and a half from now. So when I first started getting him, I was like, come on, man, you've been in office for 2 months and you're already like campaigning. But I said, okay, and there've been like 7 of them so far already. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk briefly about the content of them because it was varied, and some of it I thought was very interesting to hear about what he was using to try to sell himself as a California senator. Now, one thing about all these emails, and you'll see this with almost every type of email you get from politicians, is they'll usually have some issue, something that they want to connect with you on and say, hey, this is important to you, it's important to me, so do this. And usually the do this is sign a card or sign a list expressing support. And sometimes in the same email, they'll also say, go ahead and will you give me a donation so I can fight for this thing that we agree is important that we can do. Sometimes they'll only say sign the list, you go to the list, and then the list says, okay, you can have some money. But sometimes they'll actually go ahead on the email and ask for the money. Depends on kind of what they're going for. So the first one I got actually, and this is interesting, the first thing I got from him, to me, a California resident, was an endorsement from Cory Booker. Say, hey, I'm Cory Booker. I love Alex Padilla. You should want to vote for him. Maybe give him some money, or sign this card to ask him to support Alex. Sign this thing expressing your support for Alex Padilla as senator. So that was the first one. I said that was an eye roller. The second one was interesting. It was a policy one. This was before this minimum wage was taken out of the COVID-19 relief bill. So the second one was a policy endorsement by Senator Padilla of the minimum wage raise occurring. Now, it ultimately got taken out, and he didn't say anything about it, but I do think that it's a point to be made that he did step out as a senator and say, hey, I'm in support of raising minimum wage, because some of them, we got 8 of them that didn't, including some in pretty blue districts. So that's still good to see that he definitely at least expressed his support. If a clean bill ever got to the Senate, it's like he would sign it. So that's good. The third one was even bigger. The third one was another policy endorsement of filibuster reform. Actually, I think it said removing the filibuster entirely. So I like that. That's something that you don't hear from a lot of senators right now, but you do hear from mostly the progressive ones. So that was pretty good to hear that Senator Padilla was in support of that. The fourth was the fourth email I received was an endorsement of the American Rescue Plan. I think at that point it was rolling and they knew that it was about to pass. So he's like, hey, I'm here. I'm going to vote for it. Support me. That's going to help good stuff like this get done. That's kind of a slam dunk. You would expect that from any senator. It's fine. The fifth one was one of those generic ones that I don't like, which was we need to protect the Democratic Senate majority. Because I hear that and my first thought is why? Why should we support the Democratic majority? Tell me why. Tell me minimum wage. Tell me, something. Give me a policy, Medicare for all. Give me a plan. I was hoping to see one of those emails. I'm still waiting for that email. Give me the Alex Padilla supports Medicare for all. Okay, maybe you'll get a couple bucks from me on that one. But anyway, you want to see what you're in favor of. Of course, we want to keep a Democratic majority because they're the only party willing to at least consider policy to fix problems at this point. But when I see that, that's pablum to me. Let's keep our majority. Okay, that's red gang, blue gang stuff. I don't like that. The sixth one was ostensibly from his wife to asking you to sign a card to wishing him a happy birthday. I've seen this before from other politicians. It's fine, but that doesn't move me. I'm like, click delete. But I didn't delete it because I was keeping it for this video. But I move right on. And then the last one was another policy one. Again, good stuff. This one was about creating a path to citizenship. It specifically endorsed a House bill to support a path to citizenship. And Senator Padilla touted his own Senate bill about providing a path to citizenship for the undocumented essential workers that have been helped keeping this country rolling during the pandemic. I think that's a very politically astute bill for him to have moved forward on. I think it's pretty safe. It's kind of both a bit progressive, but also a bit safe, because he's kind of saying these particular undocumented people, we should really try to help out, when some would say you should be trying to help all undocumented workers because they're all participating in our economy and deserve the respect and dignity of being citizens. But it's still a good start. So that's what I've seen from him so far. Doesn't strike me as a firebrand, but it is good to see that he is generally a more progressive, at least as, if not more progressive politician than Kamala Harris. The question is he going to be at all a leader? And that's a question we need to ask all of our politicians, all of the ones we potentially agree with, because it's nice for you to agree with me. But if you're not willing to actually show some leadership, to actually gather other members and really try to push something forward, put a line in the sand sometimes, you're not going to necessarily get anything accomplished. I can't wait till Senator Padilla is majority leader of the Senate to see him actually accomplish anything. I need to see him working with others to get actual difficult things accomplished, and perhaps be willing to, push the waters a little bit and get his hands a little bit dirty. That's what we need to see in politicians, and that's what I'm waiting to see from Senator Padilla. But it's only been 2 months. We're going to give him a chance there before we, make any judgments. So here's the thing. That was actually my last segment. You can rewind all my stuff if you came in from a search. I got all my stuff earlier in the thing. But if you have any questions for me about my channel, about anything I've talked about, a bunch of people jumped in. That's cool. I appreciate that. I appreciate you all for showing up. Check out my channel. I got a bunch of policy stuff on there. I got current events. I got all kinds of stuff. Like I talked about earlier in my stream, I'm really trying to figure out my particular niche as a YouTuber, but it has to do with really trying to advocate for people power, for active representation, for active involvement by citizens in our government, not just during elections, but all year round. So I hope that some of you all will consider subscribing, or at least looking out for my videos in the future. I try to put my face on some of them so people recognize it. Hopefully it's a good sign. Next week on my stream, Tentatively, I want to talk about Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. I read a really interesting article about her and about her transformation from a Green Party member into now one of the most conservative Democrats in the Senate. That's an interesting one. And then also I have a person that watches my streams pretty consistently that's in Oklahoma, and he's asked me to talk about some Oklahoma politics. So I think I saw a story about the governor, and I want to do profiles of their senators to see what they're about. I think they're Republicans, but are they Republicans in principle, or are they just red gang, blue gang people that are just going to vote for whatever Mitch McConnell tells them? That's what I want to find out. Okay, I see some comments here. Brandon, thank you for coming in. I see David Justice here. And he says, anytime I try to make a comment on any of these Facebook BS is taken down, I don't even go through. So what the heck, I can't talk anymore. Yeah, Facebook is a tough platform. I've had a lot of problems. I used to work with an organization called OME, and they had tons of problems trying to get their material on Facebook. They get flagged on there. I've heard a lot about that. Facebook is really, at this point, almost trying to become like another, like establishment media. I mean, YouTube is kind of to some extent too, but Facebook especially is trying to flag. Like, they're just going to flag everything and say, you know what, we'll just flag everything that's easiest for us. Which, is again, it's a cop out. Instead of them actually finding the stuff that's really doesn't need to be on any social media platform, they're just wiping everything out and not really trying to actually moderate in a meaningful way. And so to me, that's not an answer either. And all it does is stifle everybody. And then nobody gets to say their piece and democratically express their views, which is what I think the great thing about social media is, that we all get to, if we choose to and take the energy to, express ourselves and share it with the world and try to find like-minded people and create people-powered movements and people-powered drives towards important issues and policy. Oh, Dennis, that's tough, man. Oh, if you're on Facebook, I do have a Facebook page, 10 Minutes for Democracy, that I post my videos to. I stream to Facebook. Obviously, I'm that, but I also post my videos there too, because I'm primarily on YouTube for obvious reasons. But thanks for your comment, Dennis. And I do post there too my videos, when I have the weekly ones, the non-stream ones, and even the stream. After I finish the stream, I go and I chapter it, and then I post it out so people can check out the individual items from it. Don't get a lot of views from it, but I still think it's worthwhile. But anyway, thanks everybody for joining into my stream. If there's not any more questions, I'll stay a few more moments until the everybody leaves. But if there are no more comments, then I would appreciate you coming into my stream and checking me out. As I said, I'm trying to do this every Thursday and then produce some videos that are more evergreen, that are more conceptual, that hopefully will last and people will be checking out for months, if not years to come. But those are harder to figure out. So I'm brainstorming those a lot right now and doing the stream. Who is that? Oh, Drago Gomez. I like that movie, The Raid. If that's what you're talking about. I don't think it is, though. I think that's maybe a friend of Brandon's. I'm not sure, though. That would be my daughter, actually. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. Let's see here. We got 3 left. Most people have gone. We're back to 4. Hey, if you're coming in here, I'm actually wrapping up the stream, but you can rewind and check out the early parts of the stream. And I'm going to post this video to my channel and to Facebook with chapters, at least in YouTube. I don't know how to do chapters in Facebook. But post them on Facebook, you can just see it later. But YouTube, I'm going to post it with chapters. You can check it out and look at any of the news articles that I had, news stories that I presented earlier. But I think that's a wrap for us. We got 3 left. Let's see here. I can't tell who it is, though. I know one is Brandon and one's my daughter. I don't know who the last person is, but I'm going to go ahead and close the stream out if there's nothing else. Otherwise, they might just stay forever, and I'm just going to keep talking and make the stream longer and longer. So thanks again, everybody, for showing up, and have a blessed evening. Yep, another person joined. Thanks for stopping by. Check out my YouTube channel, 10 Minutes for Democracy, and my Facebook page, also called 10 Minutes for Democracy, where I post all of my videos. Also, my Twitter, I post my videos on Twitter as well. All right, thanks for stopping by. Oh, more people are joining. All right, see, I don't want to leave. If anybody has any questions, want to talk to me about anything. Oh, Brandon's going. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks, Brandon. Bye-bye now. Actually, I can make a shadow over my face. And let's see, my key light is over there. So I'll put my hand up and see if it's all bright. If you have any questions, want to talk about the news, what's happening today, I'm going to stick around until everybody goes. Even though this light's cooking me a little bit, it's probably a little bit too close, getting a little hot. This is also wool. I need to get a lighter blazer. But more people joined. So again, I already went through actually my whole agenda. And you can rewind. If you're on YouTube, you can rewind the video and watch those from the beginning. I talk about, I can't remember. I talk about the Colorado shooting and some of the stuff that passed in the House already related to it. Hey, Char, how you doing? If anything you want to talk about, let me know. I'll give my 2 cents, or you can ask me a question, or you can post a comment and I'll read it. Just let me know what you want to do. I talked about Senator Padilla, the new California senator, and some of the emails that I got from him trying to solicit money from me. He expressed support for the minimum wage, for path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. He also supported, one more thing, but I can't remember, so I'm going to move on. I also talked about President Biden had his first presser, and he talked about getting out of Afghanistan. He said we might not make it out by May 1st. We might have to wait. That's disappointing, but he said he hopes this to be out by 2022. That's not great, but I guess I'll take it. As long as we're not still there when he leaves, that'd be great. I always talk a little bit about my channel at the beginning, about trying to find a niche, trying to find people who want to get involved in politics, that don't want to be on the sidelines, want to actually be active citizens, not just voting, but actually get involved and trying to figure out the best type of videos to make to help foster that and help foster that audience. Let's see what else. I'm gonna go back on I'm gonna roll back my outline here because I use slides. Also talked about a bit about the COVID, the border crisis, the so-called border crisis. Now, I'll say this, it's absolutely true. I'll recap it briefly. It's absolutely true that more and more people have been coming to the border. But the one point I was trying to make, and I made earlier, is that this quote unquote crisis has been going on for years, that the numbers have been going up pretty steadily since I think 2018. I think 2018 was the graph I saw, which I don't have. I'm still trying to figure out how to use StreamYard and pull things up, all that stuff that the streamers that are really skilled can do. But the graph's been going up for years. And so in so much this is a crisis, it's one that's been going on for a while. And to President Biden's credit, it seems like they're really scrambling, trying to figure out how to deal with that volume. And they're not just cramming them in cages. They're trying to actually expand their facilities and ability to address the issue so that we can and be more humane about how they address it. I also pointed out, interestingly enough, that President Trump is the only recent president in the last 40 years where the number of actual border patrolsmen has gone, or border patrol staff, overall, like it's like 19,000 something, actually went down during his administration. That was only slight, but in Obama's it went up like I think several thousand or 1,000. It went up under Clinton. It went up under George W. So Trump, the one that's been the most one to try to explain all our problems being caused by influx of quote unquote illegals or Mexicans or however he said it, was the one person who actually did not increase our border patrol numbers. So I thought that was pretty interesting factoid related to that. But he kept it about the same. It wasn't that much different, like a few hundred less. But basically it wasn't a policy of importance. He was more worried about other things. Okay. I don't see any more questions. So again, for people that just got here, you can rewind this, look at this video from the beginning. I go through all the news stories from the big ones for the week, border stuff, President Biden's press conference, President Biden's work on, what was that first thing? Oh, the Colorado shooting, the different aspects and what we think happened at this point, as well as my opinion about the different policy approaches to trying to address it in each of their limitations. And let's see, if you're on YouTube, consider subscribing, at least liking the stream. The stream actually did very well. I'm very happy with how this did. My last one only had a few people, but it wasn't a great stream for me anyway. I was kind of nervous more that time. I've only done this, I've only streamed like 7 times ever. This is a new thing, but I'm doing it weekly now. This is my weekly news show. And then I produce videos that are hopefully more evergreen and that can, or more timeless. I've got 4 or 5 of those, but that's a small amount of the number I've made. So I'm working on trying to get better at doing that. And then I also have a Facebook page called 10 Minutes for Democracy, where I post all my videos, as well as my Twitter. My Twitter and my Facebook are at the bottom there. So you can check those out as well. And my Twitter, I mostly retweet. I follow a lot of politicians that I relatively like, and as well as journalists when they say interesting stuff or I see interesting news stories. That's most of what I do there, as well as posting my videos, of course. So check me out there. Let's see. Do I have anything else I wanted to talk about? I don't think so. Yeah. I talked about for next week, one thing I'm going to do here is, depending on how much news there is I'm going to do some profiles of politicians, senators and Congress people especially, but also governors, particularly the powerful people in our society, the ones that oftentimes serve and are in public life for decades. Because once you start running, one thing about running for office is, once you start running for office, you start building a war chest of campaign funds. So once you've really made enough money, you can kind of run for whatever you want. So if you're a state senator or a state house member, you make, you get a little bit of money there. Then the bigger office you hold, the wider, the statewide, you have the entire state to potentially bring you money. You build that war chest. So usually once a politician really gets ensconced in the political machine, they go on there in our public life for decades. So someone like Pete Buttigieg, for example, we're probably going to be seeing him for the next 20 years. He's not going anywhere, right? And so are most of the politicians in their 30s and 40s that we're seeing now. They're starting to make names for themselves. Those people are going to be around. They're not going anywhere because they're going to have the money to run. Even if they lose, they'll run for something else, run for the same thing again. Because once you start getting that political machine going, it beats most of the little guys that are trying to start from scratch, or the other people that have less political experience, because experience equals cash reserves. Excuse me. So, I want to start doing more profiles, especially of younger members, and especially the younger, more ambitious members, like Kirsten Sinema, who I want to talk about next week, who I expect that wants to be president someday, based on the way that she's moved politically. She's trying to be very careful. A lot of talk about bipartisanship, even when there's none really to be found. So And then this was more so in her state. So, see, I'm already going into it. So that's the thing. When I'm here, I'm talking, I'm just going to get into it. But really, that's for next week. I'm just talking here in case anyone wants to post a comment or a question before I go. But again, check out my channel or my Facebook page or my Twitter. Keep a lookout for my next videos. I got a good one coming up about cancel culture and about, I want to make 2 videos. One about perfectly valid forms of what people sometimes call cancellation, but then also some very invalid forms, some very bad things that are done that I think are also cancellation or part of what we call like cancel culture. So be looking out for that. And see someone else joined again. Yeah, this stream is actually about to end. If you're just getting here, I'm keeping an eye on how many people are here. If you're just here, you can rewind it. I've already went through my entire stream and all my news articles and stories. Hey, Eliu, thanks for stopping by. So I just finished actually this stream. Check out my page. If you want to rewind it, you can go back and see some of the old, all the what I did earlier in the stream. I talked about the Colorado shooting, about Biden's first presser, about Senator Padilla and the emails I've been getting for him asking for money and what they kind of say about him and his policy and what he's about up to this point. I think it's pretty interesting. And but also check out my page, check out my Twitter and my YouTube. Oh, thank you, Eliu. I appreciate that. Also, check out my channel. It's funny because I did some bunch of videos. I've been doing this for about 7 or 8 months. And I used to I script out all my videos. I had some very good ones that are over the last 6 months. So you might want to go back through, check some of my old ones, see if anything strikes your fancy. There's some that are very short, some that are longer. I did some policy ones. I talked about some politicians. I did one, I did all kind. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So you have seen some of them. Cool. And yeah, so this is my weekly Thursday one. I come in, I talk about stories. Today I'm trying to build a small audience. I have a few people that come in every time. Trying to build an audience and start a dialogue. And I was trying to kind of do too much with the stream at once and try to cut it up too much. But now I'm just going to do the stream, do news, and then the videos I want to make and do SEO for, I'll just do those separately, probably on the weekend. But I'm still trying to figure out, I'm trying to do some reevaluation because I had some success early on, but then I'm still trying to figure out how to really find my niche in this. Because I think it's out there. I think I'm doing a pretty good job with my stuff when I'm getting it right. But it's about finding your audience at this point, the size of channel that I'm at. So I'm trying to do that at the same time, be consistent and continue to put stuff out there. So thanks for stopping by. Oh, someone else joined in. Hey, say hello if you just come into the chat. I'm actually wrapping up. If you haven't been to my channel before, 10 Minutes for Democracy, policy analysis. I got to talk about some issues of the day. I've got some previous news streams on the streaming side. And or if you're just getting here, I finished up my actual news items. I'm still here to answer questions if anybody wants to ask me anything or discuss anything. But you can go and do a rewind. I'm going to post this with chapters within a few hours, and you can check that out if you want to see one of the news things struck your fancy. And but yeah, I'm here as I was talking to Eliu about. I'm trying to find my niche here in terms of I'm looking for trying to build a channel. It's primarily about getting people more politically active, not just in voting, but also in campaigning and being more selective about and being an advocate for smaller, newer politicians too. Because I find that politicians, as they go to Washington or go to the state house for state ones, they sometimes forget about. And the idea of Congress, of politics in general, is for people of the communities that they're in to go forth and represent those people, not to kind of go away and never come back. And that ends up happening, at least philosophically, a lot of times. And so, I think that you need to try to keep that fresh. I don't really think that we should be having people that go to Washington and serve there for 30 years and 25 years and 20 years. I think that produces this type of the Washington think. And I have a book. It's right here, actually. My bookshelf is off to my right, your left. It's called The Town. And it's about, I started reading, I never finished it, but it's about the whole network of institutions and people and entities that exist in Washington. So when you come in there as a new politician, they start talking to you and start telling you how you need to think and how you succeed and the way things are supposed to work. And there's a whole, and now the staffers. So you have a politician that gets elected like Cori Bush from was it Missouri, I believe. She goes there. Her staff are probably people that have been in Washington for a decade or two, or at least they're probably from somebody else's staff. And indeed, a lot of the people I talk to or a lobby, they end up moving around to different offices as people win and lose elections. So even when you're electing new politicians, you also have the stagnation of the actual members of the staff that go back and forth, and they're supposed to represent their politicians' interests, but oftentimes they act as gatekeepers. So my grassroots lobbying, often find myself running into people, the staff, potentially trying to put up guards and not letting your ideas really ever get to the politician. And that's what something like bird dogging is for. We actually go to town halls and get right in the politician's face, because sometimes that's the only way you can get ideas in front of them. And a lot of success with policy is getting the ideas there in the first place, as much as you may want to. Okay, so we're down to 2. I think that is people that I know that will stay on here until I stop talking. So I'm going to go now. This is a very good stream. If you're not one of the people that I think you are, because I can't tell who it is, check out my channel, 10 Minutes for Democracy. I got 80 videos up there. I got all kinds of stuff, policy stuff, reactions to things, other streams. I put chapters in most of my stuff so you can hop around, find what you're looking for. I'm not trying to make you watch the whole thing and scan around, when it's something large, more than 6 or 7 minutes. And well, thanks for stopping by, and have a blessed evening.